Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be making a Scottish flag. So we start by taking rough sawn timber and planing all sides to make them square and true. Then we move to the cross cut sledge and cut all of the individual blocks so we have the same size, and not only the white ash blocks but also the sapele blocks. Once all the blocks are cut, each individual block then needs to be sanded to make sure that all the burrs on each edge of the block are taken off. As you can see, there are hundreds of individual blocks. This is not my most exciting of tasks. Once you've got all the blocks cut and sanded, it's then time to cut some of those blocks into half so that you can make a interlocking block profile to make up the big rectangle for the background of the flag. Here you can see the bandsaw, and just use that to cut the blocks in half. Once all the blocks are cut in half, it's then off to the clamping jig. Here you can see we're getting ready and making sure that all the blocks fit up nice and tight and there's no gaps and everything compresses as it should do. You can see there a couple of those blocks are a little light, so I just use spacers. Next comes the most enjoyable task of gluing each of the blocks together so that they fit in the form. I wish I could glue this fast in reality. Sadly, this is 20 times the normal speed. Once all the blocks are glued together and clamped in place, I then move on to the white stripes. So these are made of ash rather than sapele. So I make these into two short lengths and one long length, so that I can then make the diagonal cross for the flag. You can see things all clamped up, ready to dry. Once it's dry, I take it out of the moulds and then mark the board and put the diagonals on, remove the high spots on the back and cut the flag into its quarters. After all the bits are cut into quarters, I then take them through the drum sanders to flatten off all the edges and make them smooth. I'll do this top and bottom. After it's gone through the drum sander, I can see that they're not quite flat on the edges, so I run them slowly through the planer. Then there's a dry fit, trim so that the diagonals fit. Here I do the glue up, make sure there's plenty of glue on all the surfaces, and this is where I began to struggle. The clamping of triangles is not an easy thing to do. and it's certainly something I would look to improve for the next go. Here you can see the board is out of clamped. It's been trimmed to size, so you can see the rectangle, and I'm just running it through the drum sander to get it nice and clean. You can see they're changing the papers, running it through over and over so that I get a nice perfectly flat surface from the drum sander. Now it's all flat, I take it over to the table saw and use the cross-cut sliding carriage to square up the corners and make a perfect rectangle. You see here, just gently nudging it so it cuts directly to the line, and I use a framing square to make sure each of the corners is a perfect 90 degree. Now the very laborious sanding begins. So I start off at 60 grit, I then go through 80, 100, 120, 150, 180, 220, 320. There's lots and lots of sanding in these boards. Here you can see the handles cut in. Unfortunately I forgot to take the pictures of me routing the handles in, but I use a little jig just to make sure each of the handles is perfectly aligned and perfectly the same size on each end. And then I'm just using a card scraper to flatten off some of the rough spots and get any burn marks out from the chamfer bit that I use on the corner. You can also see that the boards had the chamfer put all round the edges. We're getting close to the end. Here you can see me using a multi-tool for sanding the handles. I found that really quite difficult to manoeuvre, so I've since bought a Festool RTS 400, which is much better for doing the handles. Thoroughly recommend it, although I wouldn't recommend it for the surfaces. The Rotax RO115 picture here is a much better sander for getting a smooth flat finish. Lastly, here you can see the finish board. This is the clip I put onto Instagram. It's been oiled with Osmo's top oil. It has 3 coats and leaves it with a beautiful satin kind of finish. It's not a shiny finish, but it's a very nice finish for the chopping boards. I find it very hard wearing. I prefer it to mineral oil. I find that seeps for quite a while and you end up having to maintain it much more than the Osmo's oils. Thank you for watching.